I wanted to tell you a bit about how Genomics England are taking on board the voices of the patients that they are helping along their rare disease and cancer journeys. And there's quite a lot of things here that I'll rattle through quite quickly, but I'm more than happy to take questions later. And we did actually publish an article in the European Journal of Human Genetics this week about what the participant panel does. So if you want any further information, I would commend that article to you. Next slide, please. So who are Genomics England? Well, they are 100% owned by the UK Department for Health and Social Care. And our company was founded in 2013 to deliver the 100,000 Genomes Project, which was looking at rare diseases and cancer. And the purposes of that was to try and find out whether it would be worthwhile trying to bring these sorts of personalised medicine into the routine national healthcare system in England. And the answer has been yes. And now we have a genomic medicine service within the NHS, which is helping to deliver that for patients in England. There's sort of 4 parts to Genomics England's mission as far as we on the participant and patient side are concerned. So they curate the National Genomic Research Library, and that is the whole genome sequences of everybody who has consented for their genome to be used in this way alongside their healthcare records. They work with the National Health Service to help diagnose more genetic disorders and gain a better understanding of cancer. And they encourage more researchers to come and look at this data. So they're currently doing a big drive to get more people around the world to come and look at the data that they have in this research library and to encourage them to be able to do more with it. And the overall purpose of this is to improve the quality of scientific knowledge about genomics, which in due course can then be fed back into healthcare systems in order for the benefit of patients to be seen in the future generations, and in some cases in the not too distant future. So the whole idea of bringing researchers and clinicians and patients together leads to the idea of an infinity loop. This was conceptualized by the Chief Executive, Chris Wigley, and it's on the next slide. So we see patient data on the left of the slide here being put into a research environment, which is then deriving insight, which are then fed back into the patient sphere. Next slide, please. So people whose data are held by Genomics England trust the organisation, partly because it's overseen by people like them with rare conditions and cancer and lived experience of the healthcare system. The participant panel is a group of people who are all participating in the research that's run by Genomics England, and the panel has existed since 2016. All of us there have either contributed our own data or have sat in the consenting conversations with our loved ones when they have consented to join this project. And so we know personally about the sort of factors that are influencing our behaviours and those of people like us. We meet 4 times a year with the Chief Executive, the Chief Scientist and other senior leaders at Genomics England, and we can ask them anything about the progress of the organisation, about what they're doing with our data and about the initiatives that they have in mind to help maximise the benefit of that for us and for them as we move forward. I'm the chair of the panel and I can report directly to the board of Genomics England if we have concerns for any reason about how things are going, although that happens very rarely indeed. Usually we can talk to them at operational level and iron anything out or indeed find solutions to problems that are mutually beneficial that way. The panel also sends members to sit on other decision-making groups within Genomics England. There's an ethics advisory committee that we have people sitting on, and there's an access review committee whose job it is to look at the individual applications from consortia who want to come and look at this genetic data and decide whether they are in line with the overall purposes of the project and whether, in fact, we are happy for them to come in and have a look. And that's an important direct link between patient representatives and how that data is used. Next slide, please. So the panel has been going since 2016, and over that period of time, our role has evolved. Initially, we were there to help talk about how people were being consented into the 100,000 Genomes Project and to try and help make the literature which was being prepared to explain to participants what the project was about more straightforward, and also to help shape how the results from these tests were being delivered back to patients. So we were advising on things like newsletters and on the wording for letters when people were going to get results back. That's a fairly traditional role for a patient representative in an organisation like this. And it's an important one, but we feel that's not where the story should end. So as time has gone by and we have built up quite a strong relationship with the leadership at Genomics England, we've been able to start pushing forward on things which we have noticed are important and which the organisation that we work with perhaps had not been focusing on because they were interested in other parts of the results delivery pipeline, shall we say. So the slide here just has a couple of pictures to remind me of some of the impacts that we've had in terms of being able to use language and encourage Genomics England to use language around how they describe rare conditions and cancer in ways which are comfortable to us, but also meaningful to them. So the language and terminology guide that you can see on the slide there is something which we published earlier this year. It's available on the Genomics England website as well, and it's a guide for clinicians and researchers and anyone else with an interest in genetics and rare disease about sorts of language that people who've got these conditions are happy for you to use when you're talking about them. And that's gone down very well in the communities that we see, and I'm very pleased that some of the doctors that I talked to have said that it has changed how they approach their patient consultations as a result of reading this guide. So that feels like a tangible impact on the wider genomics and personalised medicine sphere. I mentioned earlier our journal article, which was published this week. It is called Research Participants, Critical Friends, Agents for Change. And you can find that on the European Journal of Human Genetics website as of this week. Can you go back a slide, please? Thank you, sorry. The other things I just wanted to say here is about how we do stand up in public and talk to people like you about what the participant panel does, but also we talk back into the organisation itself, and we meet all the, or we present to all the new members of staff at Genomics England to tell them about how important it is that they take patient and participant perspectives into account in what they do. Thank you. Next slide. I presume that was a nudge that I'm running low on time, so I'll keep this brief. Here are my 5 top tips for involving patients and family members in the work that you do. I think building trust is very important. As you know, we're talking about sharing huge amounts of sensitive data here, and about managing expectations to make sure that people aren't disappointed by what you end up being able to do to help them compared to where they were hoping it might get to. Involving patients and family members in your plans from an early stage is really important. So when you're developing new initiatives in terms of maybe how you're planning a research project, for example, and it really pays off to go and talk to the people whose conditions you're looking at. And as your keynote speaker, Eric, was saying earlier, it's invaluable to discuss with the people who've got the conditions that you're interested in, because they may come up with some ideas that you'd not thought of that actually helping solve those parts of the problem could indeed be almost more impactful than what you had in mind initially. Paying people for their time is a really important thing as well, or at least offering to pay people for their time. If you're in a room, if you're a parent or a patient representative in a room with people who you know are being paid to be there as part of their job, then it makes you feel a whole lot stronger if you know that you're also being offered a payment for your time to be there. And I think it puts you on a level footing. It demonstrates that the organisation that you're working with recognise that you bring some expertise to the table, and it also enables you to step away from the work that you might otherwise be doing in order to attend. Because that's a classic problem in patient and public engagement, is that the people who can come and spend time talking to you are the people who can afford to do that, and they aren't necessarily the only voices that you should be listening to. Inviting people to comment on something specific is important, but also empowering them to have the flexibility to challenge you if they can see something in the wider picture which for them doesn't sit quite right. Listening to them and adjusting your plans where necessary is a really important part of this, because people won't keep telling you things and they won't keep wanting to talk to you if they don't think that anything is changing as a consequence of the input that they're offering. And the 5th one is the importance of building long-term relationships. Families are really invested in the outcomes of what you're doing, and that's not going to, they're living with these conditions week to week, year to year, and so they will always want to know what you're doing. And although you may feel that you have a project which is limited in terms of its scope or in terms of its funding window, or indeed on the staff who are available to help, the things that you're doing now will have a long-term impact on other families. And if you can help build a relationship long-term with that community, then that will make you both stronger in the long run. I'll leave it there, and I look forward to hearing any questions. Thank you very much.
Finally, we would like to thank Laura and Jillian for their presentation, and we open the floor for questions. I think they have spoken about many questions and have very interesting points of view, and I think maybe you have questions for them for things they have presented or for things we have not taken in this session.
Hello. I do have a mic here, waving. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we know that there are bias in many genomic databases towards certain demographic, let's say, especially since Genomics England example, where Dan Sewell recently presented that over 85% of the genomes are of Caucasian origin. When it comes to patient engagement, how do we ensure diversity also in that aspects of the work, very important work that we are doing there, to make sure that there's no such bias in the demographic, the socioeconomic demographic of those participating and contributing to this input, as well as from marginalized group?
Yes. Shall I take that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. Partly it's about whether people from minority groups are happy to put their data into databases like this. And secondly, it's then whether they've got the interest and the time to come along and talk to the people who are organising those databases about how they could do it differently. And I know that Genomics England is putting in quite a lot of work at the moment on a massive programme of diversifying the data set. They're looking carefully at the cultural background of a lot of different groups within the British population and trying to see how they can best explain the purposes of the programme in ways which will become perhaps will sit comfortably or more comfortably with those different populations in the hope of encouraging them to donate their data to the programme. But I think it is traditionally a challenge, and it's something which we can't solve overnight, and it's definitely going to be a longer term programme of building relationships with these communities. It takes quite a lot of it takes effort, and it should take effort, but we need to go out and speak to communities where they are and encourage them that the benefits of genomic medicine are going to be deliverable to them if more of them are able to share their data with these data sets. Because as we know, findings based on a purely Caucasian population are not going to be applicable in some cases, or as applicable to minorities as we would like them to be. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, yes.
It's my turn, okay. I have a question for Laura. You mentioned the question of naming diseases and the fact that with advanced diagnostics, you give name to new diseases and the impact on patients. If we get out of the domain of rare diseases and we take personalized medicine more broadly, we see a kind of reverse phenomenon, maybe. I'm thinking about cancer, where agencies have approved drugs that are called agnostic drugs, because they are targeting specific pathways or molecular receptors. And at the end, instead of having colon cancer, breast cancer, whatever, you start to have a cancer that is a kind of common one. So we have a denaming of the disease. What are your views in this respect? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting question, and I'll have to think a little bit about it. But I think that whatever it's going one way or another, sort of taking away a common name or giving a common name to someone who previously had differentiated, I think that we have to follow this and see what it does and how people use it, because at least in the field of diabetes, we really, the researchers and also, the biomedical researchers, but also the social scientists imagine that because this is a case where you actually find a genetic variation, that means that you don't have to have medication. So we imagined complete medicalization, taking away disease. And so that's one phenomenon. But what you're talking about is to give common disease. Can you say again, to give common disease name in cancer? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, so the drugs are targeted more broadly, yes. I think I've actually read something about that it also creates a sort of because it creates all kinds of imaginaries in patients. So is that then the right for me? Can it be, with this discourse also of precision and personalized medicine, may also be a fear that if is it too broad, but I don't have the answer, but I really think it's interesting. We should follow it. Thanks.
Hi, Francesco Florindi, Thermo Fisher. Thanks for the talk. I used to be a patient advocate for the largest European Cancer Patient Association. So, Jillian, what you said related very much to my experience. I have a question for you both. So, how can we, in a way, patients are trained and experts in their disease, and they know very much, they have their own experience, which is extremely powerful. That, I think, makes it a little bit easier to talk with the doctors about this disease and risks and treatments and so on. The general population is not as expert, not as health literate as patients are. What do you think IC per Med should do to actually engage more with the rest of the population to make them understand the potentials and the risk of genomics? My experience working now from industry side is that technology is not a problem. We have all sorts of solutions that can really change people's lives. The biggest problem in genomics is really engaging with policymakers, engaging with people, make them understand what can be done, what cannot be done, what are the risks, how to mitigate them, data privacy, and so on. So these are not issues that can be solved with the technology. These are political and moral issues. So what's your perspective on this? And what IC per Med can do, most importantly.
Can you start it, Jillian?
Thank you. How long do we have? Goodness, that's a really broad question. Thank you. I think people, as you've said there, people don't think that personalised medicine matters to them until something happens in their own life to trigger that interest. So it is initially very difficult for organisations like IC per Med to tell the world about something if the world isn't listening. But I think if we speak into the channels where people are already existing in terms of people who are unwell or may become unwell, then that's probably the ripest ground for discovery. People, you're not going to. There's no point putting out sort of national or international level news bulletins about things unless people can understand how they relate to them. And I think in some senses, lots of the good news stories we've seen in the British press recently about personalised cancer treatments really do begin to strike a chord with people. And I think as time goes by, we're hearing more and more about how, certainly on the cancer side, most people know somebody with cancer or have known, or I think it's 1 in 2 of us are going to get cancer at some point. So certainly the stories around cancer are probably going to be the ones which grab most people's attention most quickly, rather than necessarily trying to put a lot of effort into advertising the benefits of personalised medicine to rare diseases, because that's a much smaller population of people who are naturally going to be interested. Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, what do I think? I was actually thinking about a part of the population that's not only in healthcare because of disease, and I haven't thought this through, and I might regret that I say it, but I'm thinking that every pregnant woman coming into the healthcare system is an encounter where we have half of the population, and they are often becoming aware of the importance of genetics because we do all kinds of screening. I know that we don't regularly do genetic screening, but a lot of pregnant women are aware of that at this time in my life there's something about genetics at stake. So I'm just thinking now when you asked the question, I haven't thought about it before, that parents-to-be might be, but the reason why I'm hesitating is that I also think there could be something ethically challenging about doing that, because we all know that that is a vulnerable, or it's not only a vulnerable, but it's a particular situation in your life where you will often welcome any kind of research and screening, and so we shouldn't just do it to achieve something, but it might be a group that you can reach in terms of informing or in getting into dialogue, or yeah, that's my...
Thank you.
I come from that.
Gillian, would you like to?
Yes,
Yeah?
I'd like to
Okay, go.
go on further, if that's okay. Genomics England are doing a big project at the moment looking at the feasibility of offering whole genome sequencing for newborns as a replacement for the current screening tests, or as an augmentation to the current screening tests in Britain. And there is an enormous amount of ethical complexity involved in that. They've got quite a large team of people trying to work through all the angles. And there's a lot of useful information around what they're doing on the Genomics England website if people are interested to see that. I think you're right that, you know, approaching people when they are already coming into contact with the healthcare system is a good opportunity. But I think we need to be very careful about frightening people as well as about informing them what's possible. Because as you say, you're at a very vulnerable time of your life when you're pregnant. So there's a lot to be thinking around there.
Yeah, but I totally agree. And I was thinking more in a general information potential, not in offering screening, because I would definitely be worried about that. Yes.
Okay, there is another question back and back.
Is it okay?
And after you, okay. I have two back. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Laura and Jillian. Both enjoyed your presentations. I think it's quite fascinating, this term data sociality, which is new for me. And what it led me to think about is there a way, and going to this gentleman's comment about a role of IC PerMed, patients are using Facebook to connect, and I work a lot directly with patients in all our research projects, both as members of our research team and also to gather information and do qualitative research, etc. But it seems to me if patients are using Facebook and have identified that as a way to connect, it would be really interesting to understand what are the properties of Facebook that make it a desirable media in order to connect, and is there something we could do better to fill that need and provide a high quality service, so to speak, that would facilitate that whole process. I wonder what your thoughts are around that.
Yes, very interesting question. My first thought is that when you say, is there anything we can learn from that? I'm wondering who we are, but you mean the IC PerMed or the people constructing infrastructures for personalized medicine data storing? Yeah. I guess that it's knowing the landscape of data governance and how extremely tight it's regulated. And I know Facebook is also regulated, but it's a completely different world, and the people who enter decides how it's regulated. And I find it difficult to imagine that we could have anything publicly or a national database that could achieve that same kind of flexibility in terms of how it's regulated. But I'm really curious someone should find out and be inspired. But maybe you also have a comment, Jillian, on that.
Thank you. Yes, I do. I think the great thing about Facebook is it's universal. The world has access to Facebook, and so anybody who's recently had a diagnosis or had a child who's got no diagnosis but obviously got problems can start looking on a network like that to find people like them. And I think as a tool for connecting people, there is nothing better. Just to be able to get onto a publicly accessible forum like that and see who you can find that way. I think where we begin to need a better regulation of information is when it comes to sharing actual sensitive data about gene variants and about what underlies the symptoms that people can see in photographs. And I think that's where national level organisations or consortia of researchers around the world need to come together and put together databases which are going to be robust and secure, and invite people to come and look at those. And as an example, the Cure Grin Foundation that I'm part of, we're working with researchers in Germany and in America on trying to put together a database which is interoperable between the American and European systems, but which will encapsulate as much patient data as we feel that we can volunteer to put in there, so that other people can come and look at us together. So I think it's a hybrid model, really. You need the global platforms like Facebook to make the connections, but then I think getting down into more private spaces to do the actual science and research is probably the better way forward.
Thank you. We have a last question in the back. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. In the discussion, it's very interesting, and you referred to the identification of new variants and giving a name to a mutation, which is reflecting then a disease. But if I would be diagnosed like that, I think it's quite empty. What I would like to know as a patient is, what is it actually doing, and why is it causing a disease? If you are struggling all your life with assumed diabetes 2, and at 50 years it is said, well, you have diabetes, but you don't have it, so what's happening? And that is something that should also be explained, I think, trying to not saying you have a G2A mutation or a proline to serine change in your protein, but what is it doing mechanistically? And I think then you can, as a patient, I would feel more, that I have a feeling I understand that more than I have a certain variant.
Yes, definitely, and thank you for saying that. And that is also part of the story that I didn't have time to give you details about. But so both the fact that patients are meticulously explained what this means, and also we're trying now to follow up on, so what does it mean to take that, also that identity away from you, from having had diabetes for 40 years, and then, well, what does that mean? What does that make me? So that's also what I'm very interested in the future. But we've been waiting for, this is very symptomatic, but we've been waiting 2 years to go ahead with the diabetes project because of regulatory struggles. So it's slowly starting now, but you're right, that's very important. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think was the last question. I appreciate the public question, and I just finish our session and give the floor for you.